Today, I'd like to show you guys the Kira mechanical keyboard and have a little bit of a discussion about it and see what's to like and what's not. Moving directly on over to the product, we're presented with this awesome box or case. It's fabric with semi-hard sides. It's pretty good, all things considered. When we open the box, we're presented with a fairly good presentation. We've got a pouch at the top with some tools and keycaps. So you get a cable, you get a different set of accents than the ones that come on it stock. You get a keycap and a switch puller. And that's actually pretty great, especially for a hot swap keyboard. Then we get on to the meat and potatoes. Putting all this off to the side, we can take a look. Now, I've opened mine already, and I've changed out the switches that came on it. I had Hakko Royal Violets, and honestly, I like the Hakko switches. I wanted to try out some Telio V2s, and while I've already tried them out, some box navies. Neither one of these options come standard with this keyboard. But going on and plugging it in, we get some fancy RGB lighting, which other people have said they've had QC problems with. I actually haven't. I have an inductive mouse pad here, and it does seem to affect it when my cable goes over it. It doesn't seem to affect any other keyboards that I have, and it does seem to affect this one when the actual plastic body passes over it. And I think that has to do with the electronics being interfered with. It's not really that big of a deal because my mouse pad stops way over here, but it's a thing to note if you're in that situation. All right, moving on to the product page, we can have a little bit of a discussion about what Kono has to say about this keyboard and why some of those things are or aren't important. Starting over at the top, we'll go over the fact that it's $259 for the metal frame, $179 for the plastic frame, and in reality, well, we can discuss that in a second. It's a 99 key condensed full-size layout. I don't really know if this is a good thing. For me, I need the 10 key. I think most people in our community don't want or need the 10 key. And so for a keyboard that isn't their daily driver, it might be a bit much. But definitely for people who aren't in the hobby, they're going to want their 10 key. They seem to universally say, oh, I can't live without my 10 key. And, or at least in my experience. And so I can appreciate that it has those. Now, it says hot swappable switches, and that's absolutely true. In fact, it's the most important part of this keyboard. It's, for anyone who's in the hobby, really the only reason I could see anyone wanting to buy it, because it would allow you to rapidly switch switches and go ahead and try and see if you like something new. And there's really no drama there. I've seen other PCBs on other keyboards that fall a little bit lower in the same segment, and they don't work with 5-pin or PCB mount switches. And in this case, they do. There are some other options where they do that are a more condensed layout and are less expensive for metal options. And I think those ones actually feel a little bit more premium from a weight standpoint, or at least a density standpoint. It has an injection molded plastic or CNC aluminum keyboard frame, or so they say. In reality, what it has is a complete plastic body with a bezel, which is premium feeling in and of itself, but the rest of the keyboard really isn't. So that's pretty much what you get, right? And you have a steel or some type of magnetic plate, obviously, since this snaps on magnetically. Now, I don't know if this is really your jam. I think a lot of people see that text and they think, well, I can get a fully CNC'd keyboard. Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's important to you or not. I think it is to me. I think it is to anybody who's already in this community. But again, this probably is serving a niche that doesn't include us to some extent, or it services us in a different way. So it sounds fairly good. I mean, no, there's no drama with the sound. It sounds a little resonant because of the plastic body that has a fairly large opening in it. And I have taken my PCB and plate off to see what was under there, and actually to Band-Aid mod the plate to reduce some bad sound, some rattles. But by and large, the sound is a little hollow and not that deep as a result of it being plastic. The feel is a keyboard that to most is going to feel heavy for what it appears to be made out of, but it's not going to be heavy or feel heavy to anyone in our community who's used to dealing with any kind of custom or even something that, let's say, KBD Fans has to offer. From a looks standpoint, it looks fantastic if what you want is RGB. If you want the R's, the G's, and the B's, it definitely gives you those in spades. The surface is completely separated from the underglow in terms of the way you can make it glow. What I showed you right when it started up is the two working in unison, but you can change them. I don't know if that's important. I don't think that's all that important to me, but this is actually the very first keyboard that I ordered. I'm not that seasoned in the community, so when I ordered this, I was like, yeah, that's the thing I want. I want hot swap. And it turns out I really don't care that much. I care a little bit for testing stuff. Anyway, moving on. It says that it has PBT dye sublimated keycaps, which for me is fantastic. I actually prefer PBT to ABS as a keycap material, generally speaking. If we start talking about ePBT over, yeah, you guys are going to hate me, this is blasphemy, over GMK ABS or Signature Plastics, I kind of like the PBT feel. I like it. And I like the idea that they aren't going to wear out very quickly at all. Now, that's not to say that I don't like those other kinds of keycaps. I absolutely do. I'm in love with some. But generally speaking, I feel like PBT is very durable and is a great thing for a daily driver. It has USB Type-C, Type-A cable. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's the future, right? We're USB-C. Fantastic. Welcome to the party. RGB LED indicator lights. That's, I think they're talking about these over here off to the side. And yeah, that's fantastic. I think most keyboards have the ability to do that thing. It has NK rollover. I have not tested full NK rollover. It doesn't seem to have from my really most basic testing any problem with rollover. You're absolutely hitting as much rollover as you generally need. Now, it's great. I'm sure it does have N key rollover and full N key rollover, and that's fantastic. It's not actually that important to me. Anyway, it's compatible with Windows, Linux, and Mac. Great. That's a great comment from a marketing perspective. I mean, really, what keyboards aren't, right? And open source hardware. I can't actually figure out why that thing is important at all, or who would care. I'm not finding links to drawings on the website where I could, for instance, make my own bezel based solely on the drawing with some other features. They didn't deliver me a model for it to try and make my life easier to do that thing. I'm not saying that they won't. The Kono people seem to be pretty community engaged, and I think that's great. I actually like Kono generally a lot, in a lot of ways. Despite some of their shortcomings, they're really good. And they're great for the community, as far as I can tell. That's really what they're all about. And the one meetup that I went to, where I talked to some of their representation, they do seem to actually care, and that's a great thing. But open source hardware, yeah, sure, that's great, right? So I'm gonna move on to my actual gripes about the keyboard. I think there are a lot of trade-offs that had to have been made to produce this product in the quantity and timeline, roughly, although we'll get to that in gripes, that they were trying to achieve. And I think that basically they did okay. They did okay, but one of my biggest gripes with this is actually that it feels cheap compared to other boards with a similar price. If you were to compare the plastic version of this, which is $180 roughly, to an IKBC MF108, right? That MF108 is going to absolutely dominate this in terms of feel. It's heavy. It has the sound of something with a steel plate and just heavy metal all around it. And with the exception of customs, it's fairly heavy, right? Anything, if you were to compare this to pretty much anything Topra, especially the plastic one, though this is metal, honestly, even this metal bezeled one, if you were to compare it to anything Topra, I think you're going to find that they feel like higher quality. I have an FC980C, and it's slightly larger, and it has a slightly different layout, right? I mean, it's 1800 and this is 96 key roughly. I mean, I guess it's 99, but you know what I mean. That just feels like a better keyboard all around. It does. It feels better constructed. If you were gonna compare it to a Ducky Shine, you're gonna find that the Ducky feels at least as good. I think better. And then at the lowest end, as far as I've seen at least, Varmillo, right? I would say that it feels as good to me as the one or two things that I've touched that were Varmillo products. Obviously those, at least the metal ones, right, they have a cast aluminum body, so they feel a lot lighter and thinner, and they are, than probably a lot of other aluminum options, but they feel in the same ballpark as this. So if you like Varmillo, or that's the passing line for you, and I think for anyone who's not a hardcore member of this community, of the mechanical keyboard community, someone who's actually not a person who's into all the really standard or the really premium boards, you know, in the really expensive range, much more than 180, then you're going to find that this is of that quality level, which is passing to most, but probably not to people who are hardcore keyboard enthusiasts. So another big gripe is it only has box Kaiwa box switches and cherry switch options, and only a few, right? The navies that are in here, those aren't an option that you can get. The Telios that are in here, those aren't an option you're gonna pick up. And I kind of understand why Telios aren't an option in this, but these box navies, there's no reason for that. And there are a bunch of other box switches and other regular Gatoron or Kaiwa options that I would really like to see them offering. Instead of, you know, like a dozen selection that you can make on their website, I would really prefer to see a drop-down list with just a huge number of possibilities. So, I mean, that's you know, that's big, but it's not huge. I think most people, the too many options, if they're not in the community already, are going to be a little scary. But they'll make it through, and if they're crossover members, they're coming in from outside into the community, then those options are going to be a little bit of a godsend. The keycaps are a big gripe for me. They feel thin for PBT caps and light, very, very light to me. I don't know, I haven't weighed them, but they don't feel as premium as something like EPBT, and I'm sure they aren't. But an even bigger gripe, and almost one of the biggest gripes from a QC standpoint that I've experienced with this board, is actually that these are stretched from the factory. These two rows where I put a lot of box navies on here, they seem to not fit some switches that I tried in here. So before I tried box navies, I tried to put some Zeliostotles in, and those Aristotle stems were too loose for this, whereas I have plenty of other keycaps that they fit perfectly on, including lower quality keycaps sometimes where they just fit. So I believe that even though on the actual website they stated that the stock Kira keycaps aren't affected by this problem, it turns out they very likely are, at least from my initial estimation of the situation. And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? You bought this keyboard, it was fairly expensive. It came with keycaps that looked fairly nice, honestly. And, you know, this is what you get. All right, so I know there were QC concerns with the sub-legends and the keycaps in other ways. And I mean, I think if you're not a hardcore community member, you're probably not even going to know that it happened. Or if you weren't reading, you didn't read their stuff. But whatever. Skipping over that, because you can just go read all about that if you want to. They're lubricated. The switches were lubricated. Or not the switches. The stabilizers were lubricated from the factory. And it's actually a gripe for me because they were very poorly lubricated. Very poorly. Very lightly lubricated, I should say. Not enough to reduce rattle. In fact, there's still a little bit of rattle for me and sound bottoming out caused by the resonance of the keyboard itself, the plastic that I was talking about earlier. But that part I don't think you can get away from. But I did pull it apart, and I did Band-Aid mod the switch plate, and I did relubricate the stabilizers, and it's actually a lot better off because of it. mine is not representative. Mine is not very representative, and I don't even know if you can actually. I can tell you can't really hear it, but mine is pretty quiet. But it's definitely not as quiet as other boards that I've built. So there is a little bit of rattle still. A big gripe that I think almost everybody who bought in a pre-order for this has is that there were delays in shipping and in production, and those delays, well, they weren't communicated perfectly, I don't think, to everybody. There was a lot of communication, but there wasn't good management of our expectations. At first, I expected this keyboard to be in September, I think, and that's just wholly unrealistic, right? If they had just said this thing is going to ship in January from the beginning, I don't think anybody would have actually been upset, really. Not truly. As it stands, that's not the case with a lot of people, I think, in the community. But I'm going to move on to praise, right? Because I don't want to slam the keyboard too much. It has its flaws and its shortcomings, and I know that Kono made trade-offs, right? So I want to talk about where we should really praise this board for being awesome. So, and maybe not even just the board, but Kono in general. So Kono is making a valid attempt to engage with people interested in the hobby, but who might not actually be in the hobby. And they're delivering a cool option to newbies. Now, I think the price is a little bit high, and those newbies might be served if they're the kind of people who are going to actually really get into it and don't care about 10 key, who could benefit from something a lot different, especially if they're going to go with the metal option of this board. But they really are engaging, and I think another place that they're really winning is that even if you are in the hobby, you probably want to have at least one hot swap board around, right? So I ordered this, and then I ordered an IKBC MF108, and I like that thing. But I also ordered a GMMK, 2 mass drop ones, one to give away as a gift, which I did, and the other for myself. And I have another hot swap board. I have a tofu hot swap, and I gave that other GMMK to a friend to test a bunch of different kinds of switches that I lent him also, so he could just figure out what he wants, because he knows that he wants a nice keyboard but doesn't really want to do all the investment of time and effort that I am for me. Well, there are shortcomings with that board that really aren't inside the scope of this, but this is a much better board, right? The fact that it takes 5-pin or PCB mount cherry switches is great. The tofu does too, and it's actually cheaper a little bit than this, but it is 60%, which for me is a non-starter. I think that doesn't apply to most people in the hobby, though. It absolutely applies to me. I actually do need 10 key. So I have some 10 keyless keyboards, and really I find myself switching back and forth. And so 1800 is kind of one of my go-to layouts, and this is close. Not quite the same, but close. I think, though, because a lot of the 10 keyless keyboards are super nice, what I need to do is probably just get a 10 key like side pad where I just have it when I use it. And so for me, I use it for gaming because I'm lefty and I don't crunch my hands up. In fact, that's like the opposite problem, and a reason that a lot of people want to use 60% keyboards so that their hands aren't super far apart but aren't close, like right on top of each other or something weird. Anyway, I use 10 key. I think that newbies really want that thing, even though they don't really realize a lot of them don't need it or really use it. But in any event, yeah, I think that this isn't a feature that makes this board worth an increased price or more desirable to most people once they've got it and are using it, or who are likely to. But everybody really needs that hot swap board, and this really is, as far as I can tell, in this category, probably the most premium of the hot swap boards that I've seen. There are some other options that are either full size or 10 keyless, right? You've seen them on Mastrop. You know what I'm talking about. And then there's other stuff on other places, but I don't want to go too in depth on it. Basically, this is a really good option, like really good for that thing. It's fantastic at it. That is the best selling point of this board, is its hot swappability. I'm going to give them praise for the way that they attach this bezel magnetically also to the plate, which is obviously attached to the body. And it's not just, so at the NorCal meetup, they had a bezel that was like red or something, the same bezel. And that's really cool that you can have different paint jobs, whatever. But actually, I think what they did is they left it open for you to make a bezel that doesn't look like this bezel. On the inside, obviously, it needs to clear the keycaps and switches and whatever other, well, that's really it. But you can make a bezel that goes around this thing that works differently, that has a different exterior shape. And I think that actually presents some really awesome options that I hope people who use this board or people who are interested in this board will make available and use and make custom stuff that works with this thing, that maybe doesn't cost a ton of money, but gets them some really awesome value from, or that they're using by just simply leveraging the design that Kono already put into this thing. And I think whether that goes anywhere or not, it's worth really praising them for coming up with a cool, unique design, and then executing that thing and presenting it to the people in the hobby, right? That's really, really awesome. So yeah, I also want to talk about whether this thing is actually a winner overall, and to who it might be a winner, right? So I think the biggest market that this could present itself strongly and who it's a winner to is that segment of population who like premium things but aren't a part of our community, really. The hardcore mechanical keyboard people aren't part of that community, and like they're not on /r/ mechanical keyboards, or they're not trolling Mech Market all the time, and they're not watching Top Clack, every week. They're not those people. But what they are is interested in cool mechanical keyboards that look cool and have features that they think are important to them. Whether those end up being features that they think are important to them down the road or not, it's pulling those people in. And to those people, this is absolutely a winning product. It really is. So it's also a winner, I think, for just people who are interested in innovative design. It is actually cool. It's not so out there that it's not like a dactyl keyboard on like some non-community site, right? It's not. I mean, I think you guys know what I'm talking about. It's not some like basically manuform dactyl keyboard on Kickstarter, right? Which is cool, but it might be barking up the wrong tree. I think maybe not. I don't know. There's a lot of people on. It's a big enough market that maybe it's not. But in this case, it's not doing that thing. It's actually it's normal enough to appeal to that segment of the market, the people who are interested just in innovative design. So it's not a winner at all. It's a very big loser, I think, for Kono in terms of execution of design and delivery that engages the marketplace and manages their expectations properly. They didn't win there, and this isn't a winner in that category. And if you look at the reviews on their site right now, right, customer reviews, sure, it's you know, it's 4.5 stars based on 34 reviews or whatever, but like the things that just show up right here on the front are you know, quality's bad, I'm disappointed, and talking about, you know, bad quality, bad QC, also problematic QC. I haven't had major issues. Like I said, I mean, sometimes, nah, see, it doesn't. For me, it's really always tied to, this, a cable, not even necessarily this cable, but a cable or the body of this thing being over my inductive mouse pad. But obviously other people are having issues with it, and that's a thing they need to address, right? I mean, they absolutely need to be on top of that. That's just important. So it's not a winner there. If you're hardcore into mechanical keyboards, I would actually say that the metal option especially, but both, honestly, no, well, really the metal option is only a winner if you are both, or you are all a baller, right? Because it's expensive for an off-the-shelf keyboard. You have to have 10 key, and you're afraid to learn to solder, because the reality is that if you're hardcore into this thing, you know that this type of keyboard with these hot swaps, it's really cool for experimenting and finding out about new switches, but it isn't as stable and rock solid as a soldered in switch that fits tightly to its plate, etc. It just isn't as good. So this is only a winner for those people who are hardcore into it, if you're not willing to solder, or you're not willing to pay someone else to get it done for you. That's really the review. I want to praise it in one more place that I forgot to mention, and this is actually, well, I didn't forget to mention it, but I didn't mention it in my praise overview. I want to praise it for this case, right? This case that goes along with this thing almost makes this keyboard super worth it for me, because even though it's big, this thing makes it portable in a way that makes me want to carry it around. It looks cool. It protects it right. It has a pocket where I can store these tools and stuff that I need to. And if I'm hardcore into keys, I'm telling you, I want to have this stuff, but I also don't want to take up, like, literally, I can throw switches in here, right? I mean, let's here, some Telios or whatever. Yeah, sure. We're gonna switch all to those later. In fact, you know, let's get those original Hackos that came with it to F it, right? It will fit all this stuff in here. You do kind of need to, like, flatten them out and spread the switches out so they don't interfere with the keyboard. But yeah, that's a thing. But this is actually pretty cool, right? If I want to take this thing and I want to show all my friends, or I want to show people who maybe aren't that initiated into it but that are interested, this is a great way to do it. This is a fantastic way to do it, and this case actually is a big part of that, in my opinion. Anyway, so yeah, my overview and my review is done. I know you guys know what I think of it. I think it's actually kind of cool in its own way. I'm tempted to sell it, but I don't know. There is enough cool about it that I kind of don't want to get rid of it. Although very likely I will, because I got, you know, too many keyboards and too many projects. Anyway, thank you guys, and you all have a good typing experience when you get one of these, hopefully. All right, bye.